Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this May 1st, 2015 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony. You're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com, and you can catch my show, the Investigative Journal, every Monday through Friday from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Now, I want to make a few comments on the show I did yesterday because I know a few people emailed me with a little bit of a disagreement or misunderstanding of what I was saying. Like I prefaced my show yesterday, these weren't my views, but the views of a man who wrote a book called The Rulers of Evil, Tupper Saucy. And we began looking into his thoughts that came out in this book 2 days ago. Well, I've been doing it for months as I'm writing a screenplay about his life. It's so interesting. As I'm doing with the life of Tony Alamo, the minister who is now serving a 175-year sentence for primarily standing up for the truth and criticizing the Vatican. So, how does that reconcile with what I said yesterday? And let me explain this. I told you a long time ago that there is nothing wrong with telling the truth or looking at the facts regarding what the Vatican has been about, both in a historical, secular sense as well as in a spiritual sense. And all Tony Alamo and Tupper Saucy were doing were telling you that. Now, in my show yesterday, I mentioned that I don't think it's wise to revolt, and I don't think it's wise to hide away and just keep your mouth shut. But it is wise to stand up for, in this sense, it could be a stand up for the Word of God. What is on the righteous side, not on the evil side? And these men did just that. So why, if all they did was make themselves available, which I said is basically if you've decided the same thing I have, that is, we must understand the truth behind the Vatican and our government, and we talk about it, why were these men then, just who made themselves available, persecuted by the Vatican and by the governments of the world? Well, this is nothing new. You could say the same thing about, you can go all the way back to Jesus. You can go all the way back to the apostles. Then you can look at the Protestant reformers. They weren't in essence trying to overthrow any government, and neither was Saucy or Tony Alamo. What they were trying to do is let you know what this was all about so you can make a decision. And not to overthrow your government, but to basically understand what they're really all about. To break through the deception. Now, how come the people I mentioned were persecuted and others aren't? Well, I believe it depends on this. For long periods of time, if you look at history, anything that would basically put a big stumbling block in the path of the New World Order, it had to be erased. And so what does that mean? It means even if you look back to Jesus and just look at his historical value, and whether you consider him the Son of God, and there's many people in the world who consider him just a prophet. Look what he was standing up against, and he was a huge threat. He was popular. It could have put a big stumbling block in the path of the New World Order. So that's the same thing that went on with the Protestant reformers. And if you check out, like I have, the people who have spoke out on this issue honestly, or at least to a point of saying, listen, look at the facts here, and look at the facts you're told by others. And you'll see that this story has a lot of merit. The people that get put into the crosshairs, like Tony Alamo, like Tupper Saucy, maybe like Keith Green, remember that, the popular singer? What happens is, if you have become popular, if you have a following, if you gather resources that put a stumbling block, a big one, in front of this New World Order movement that's been going on for thousands of years, you will be put in the crosshairs. Now, for example, others, and there's many out there, who understand this story, and talk quietly about it, right? Just like my dog Moose is going to talk quietly about it because she sees a buddy of hers coming by the house, huh? Is that a buddy? Uh, if you don't have a huge following, if you don't present a serious threat to their paths of evil, you can probably go on your whole life without ever having a problem. Outside of maybe, let's see, they at every level there is the way they work, and I know it because I'm a perfect example. I don't have a huge following. I don't have a lot of money. I don't present an immediate threat to the New World Order. People have asked me over the years, how come nothing happens to you? And I said, because I'm not as popular as the people that you see out there really making a difference, affecting a lot more souls than me. They're the ones. It was maybe some of the people that I'd have on my show that were really the ones that were in the crosshairs of the Vatican-led New World Order. Now, in my level, for example, there are many people like me. And what they do is they use people to discredit you at certain levels. For example, if my outreach is in the alternative media, they have alternative media controlled opposition broadcasters who have a larger audience and have more money, and they're paid basically to discredit someone like me. Now, how do I know that? Because I know the things they wrote were lies. Now, you're not going to convince that to some of their readers or listeners. No. So what have they done? They've marginalized the message. That's enough. Let's go on to something bigger and better. There are bigger fish to fry, right? And that's exactly how it works. So how can I tell you? Because I've seen it happen to myself. I know my past. And the ideas that they spread about me were completely false. Now, like I said, there are going to be people who are going to believe them and not me, and probably more because they have a larger audience. And people have not gotten to the bottom of this story. And so I wanted to make that perfectly clear. And secondly, someone yesterday mentioned in an email to me, what do you mean you don't fight against these people? I said, no, you can't. And let me explain why again. And why you're not really thinking when you say that. Because what they want is to drive you into revolt. Look, the people I talk about in the show, Tony Alamo, Tupper Saucy, they weren't revolt. They weren't basically trying to create an army to destroy the New World Order. They were just letting you know what this is all about. And because of their popularity, they were put in the crosshairs. That's the difference. And so basically, when you look at the two ministries that I talked about yesterday, something that most people, even in Christianity, don't talk about, the ministry of condemnation or the ministry of reconciliation. You can't be in both at the same time because you'll turn out just like them. And these guys understood it. The Protestant reformers understood it. And what did they do? They just made themselves available to you. And that's about all you can do. Because if you think you're going to change this world as it is, think again. Because the only people that really change it, and it's always to the path of evil, are the condemners, the people that work in the system that understand it and understand who their God is. Not the millions that work for them who are deceived. They need that. And that's one reason why when you have a popular ministry, or if you have a lot of influence in the music industry, things they use to propagandize, then they'll come down on you. And I've seen it happen time and time again. So, for those of you who really believe that you can revolt against this New World Order system that's been around for thousands of years, people have tried, but that's exactly what they want. Because they have to have aggressors. They have to have an enemy. And they can turn the table on you. Once you do that, they'll say, you don't believe in God and country. And if you look throughout the course of history, and you take the some of the biblical remnants of this that teach us this. You'll see it started with Cain. Now, other people, I've talked to people about this interpretation of Cain, and they dismiss it and say, no, no, no. It's basically just a freedom of choice. Evil comes from people who have this, you either choose evil or good. Well, I say this: if you don't understand what God really meant about evil, how can you make a proper choice? You can't. There is no choice. Just like you grow up in the American system not understanding what it's about, you don't have any choice when you vote. You think you do, but you don't. It's a lie. It's a deception. And that's exactly what many people, the Vatican does with Christianity. They deceive you with so many of their traditions, things that are not even close to what the Bible says. Worshiping Mary, idol worship, weeping statues. It goes on and on, thinking that the Pope is God on earth. I mean, some of these things, when they get right down to it, baffle the mind than people actually believe them, but they do. And at the higher levels, you see these organizers, these top-level Vatican officials who wear they tell you with their garb, they tell you with the obelisk in St. Peter's Square who they really worship, and it's not the God in the Bible. And when you start talking about this, my goodness, immediately people can't believe it. Well, anyway, let me explain one last time. And I'm going to quote from his book, Tupper Saucy's, what he's talking. He says, once he understood these two ministries, hard questions answered themselves. And, I will say that what I just told you about my interpretation of how this works and why people get persecuted, like Tony Alamo and Tupper Saucy, I think by looking at it from this point of view, hard questions have been answered for me. Now, what can people, and there's so many responsible citizens. Now, what is a responsible citizen? I don't think it's one who doesn't understand what's really going on or even try, or stops his education with the alternative Alex Jones show. No. It's one who really has spent the time understanding what this New World Order is all about. And first realize that, and this is according to Tupper Saucy, no judgment that government is immoral, unfair, and unconstitutional can be executed unless by an authorized person. So these governments have been set up. And the oath, whether good or bad, has been placed, and you have people who are authorized to make these decisions for you. All right? Only condemnation. These people who condemn has authority. They'll condemn you for talking up against the Pope. They'll condemn you without the facts. If you believe in anything but America and apple pie, etc., etc., without even worrying about the facts. Now, to change government by these conventional means, you must become a condemner. And Tupper Saucy asks a good question. Can anyone name a true reconciler? Someone who is great in the world that's been a true reconciler? No. To gain influence among condemners, you must master their arts. The art of war, Sun Tzu, the trickster, the art of Satan's deceit. You must master that. And let me tell you something. When you really think about it, when I've tried to understand this New World Order, I've had to try to think like them. And man, you're just like that homicide detective who has to start thinking like the serial killer to catch him, right? It's no different. Now, you have to master these arts. So little good this will do. For when you really investigate this is tended to show always the preponderance of condemnation's resources go into keeping the system evil. That's why it gets worse and worse and worse all the time. Now, if you build forces capable of meaningfully altering the system, they will terminate you because they are authorized to do this. Just like Cain was protected and authorized and given that protection sevenfold. And in short, in the worldly system that's been created, no matter what part of the world you're in, I don't care if you're in China, Thailand, that's why there's really nowhere to go. People think, I'm going to escape to a different country. It's no different. It may, on the surface, you may end up in a fascist country. You may end up in a country that seems chaotic and democratic like Italy. But in the end, it's all the same. Because the potential for improvement within this system, worldly system of condemnation, it's really limited to cyclical periods in history if you look at it. You may be lucky. For example, those of us who grew up in the 50s, we're lucky. It was a cyclical period of, well, pretty nice times. And it was a period where the condemners were gearing up for their next round of bad times. And that came, and you see it now. We're coming into another round of bad times, maybe even worse than the times before. Maybe worse than World War II, maybe worse than World War I, maybe worse than the Civil War, maybe worse than the Revolutionary War. But in between these periods, you have these cyclical periods of good times and bad. And this is so obvious from the history and the news. Now, Christians wonder why God doesn't just change this. He could, couldn't he? If he's all-powerful. Now, if you read the Bible from a purely secular or a spiritual point of view, doesn't it say he will do that in the last days? But he doesn't say when. And what does that lead you to believe? Now, any one of these guys that I've ever talked about understood this and understood that only God can change this. And the question is when and how. And that is a question I can't answer. Now, what about this idea that reconcilers are told that improving human rulership is their responsibility? Not by taking control of the system, and not by sealing themselves off in well-fortified communes. Now, there's nothing wrong. For example, we all live in neighborhoods that are comfortable for us. Oh, I can remember growing up in the Polish-Italian neighborhood in Chicago, and it seemed to be all people that were like me. Nothing wrong with that. People are drawn towards people who look like them, talk like them, have the same values. And that's why you see some of these Christian communities saying, I want to at least have the opportunity to spend as much time as I can spreading the Word of God. And I can do this better if I'm around people that I believe feel the same way. And that's where these ministries come into view, like Tony Alamo's ministry and others. And that's why when this happens and it grows, the trickster has to get rid of them. And that's why Tony Alamo's in jail right now. And that's why Tupper Sassi, with his little group, when he wrote the book of Miracle on Main Street that started to galvanize people around the system, the real truth of our financial system, got him in trouble. So nothing wrong with this. The point of view is this: none of these people that I talked about are you don't lose track of what's going on in the world. And there's people out there that say the only way to live is you got to go up into the mountains and hills and hide yourself. That's not any answer. And it's not an answer to create these groups like the militiamen. Go to Idaho sometimes, up in the panhandle. And most of these groups, these white supremacist groups, and even people that spread hatred through the Bible, people who say, and there's some of these crazy people out there who appear to be your friend, telling you, there needs to be one state of completely white people and one state of, it's a racist view. It's ridiculous, and those people should be outed for what they really are. They're trying to get people, just like you go up to these Idaho places where they're training these white militia people. There's always going to be a connection to the condemners, to people in power that are creating these organizations, because they realize, just as Cain realized, that the more aggressors, the more people that you can get to fight against you, the more power you will get in the end. And that's why they've created ISIS. That's a worldwide problem. And this is a great aggressor, isn't it? It's changing the way you think, the way we live. And I told you a long time ago, they tell you through their signs and symbols who they are. ISIS is being worshipped right in Washington, D.C. with that obelisk that's called the Monument of Freedom. The same in Rome, the obelisk in the square, because that's a worshiping symbol, phallic symbol to ISIS. So they created it. They're telling you who they are. But people don't. They listen more to the condemners who own the media stations. They listen more to even the alternative guys who work with them than they do to the truth. And what I mean by the truth is this. How do you know, I'm not saying, what I'm saying is if you don't put these symbols and these ideas that I'm talking about, let's just talk about ISIS, into your memory, into your brain, so that you can make a decision on what is the truth, how can you ever get to the truth? And perhaps this will help you. So what I'm saying is I'm not telling you this is the truth. I'm telling you this is a step you need to go to get to it. And that to me makes a lot of sense. But they don't want you to take that step. Because they know if you do, the chances of you understanding what they're really all about increase tenfold. They'll no longer have any aggressors. They'll no longer have the same power to create these terrorist organizations. And the more that you know, the less chance they have of moving this new world order quickly like they want. And if you're a major stumbling block, they will put you in the crosshairs. Now, I think that explains it pretty well. And let's come back in the second half hour, talk a little bit about some of the things we live with today, like this new military operation I've heard all over the internet, Jade Helm, which is really a very, very interesting organization. Yeah, these people, they can't constantly beeping their horns. But anyway, we'll see what that's all about, plus other things. I wanted to really look at a couple things regarding the Jesuit Vatican New World Order. And we'll do that in the second half hour, and it relates to what we're talking about here. Now, I know people may disagree with certain things, but that's really good. The only way we ever get to the truth is by somehow disagreeing on things. And maybe you have a better idea. Maybe you have an idea that could add to this compilation of what could lead to getting really to the bottom and to the truth of things. Okay, this is the Investigative Journal. We'll be back after these short messages on FirstAmendmentRadio.com.
Hear it first on FirstAmendmentRadio.com and FirstAmendmentRadio.net. The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening. Gold and silver is tremendously undervalued. Global demand vastly exceeds mine supply by more than 60% annually. There is little in the financial world more certain than a coming explosion in the prices of gold and silver. The U.S. dollar continues to lose value and respect as the world's reserve currency. Our nation faces challenges on many fronts, and a day doesn't pass without another economist bringing forth warnings of impending economic calamity. There has never been a better time than right now to acquire physical gold and silver. Discount Gold and Silver Trading was founded on the principles of truth and honesty. We believe in providing a quality product, quality service, and most importantly, competitive pricing. We provide all forms of precious metals, including American gold, silver, platinum, and rare investment and circulated coins. Silver bars, rounds, and 90% silver bags are on hand for the silver investor. Gold self-directed IRAs are available. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, that's 1-800-375-4188.
Okay, we're back on the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this May 1st, 2015 day on our calendar. And I want to talk a little bit about this, what's called this military operation that's going to be taking place from July 15th through September 15th, I believe. And they're already gearing up for it now all over the country. Many stories coming out. It's another one of these military operations that tells the American people when they see it, they don't really come out and publicize it. You don't see the mainstream news talking much about it. But when you get reports like I got, a kid driving his car through Barstow, California, started YouTubing. It was only about a 10-15 minute YouTube. The amount of military vehicles that were parked in these open, empty lots. I mean, it's incredible. It was going on for miles and miles of these vehicles. I'm going, what? What are they being used for? Well, Jade Helm. Okay, let's talk a little bit about it. And let's, and it's a perfect example of what I was talking about in the first half hour. You create this idea of terrorism. You create the aggressor. And then you have a reason now to come out with all your military force and say, we're going to protect you against any civil unrest. We're going to protect you against any person. Well, guess what? Doesn't that really fall into the pattern of what I was talking about? We're going to protect you, America, against people who, one, may talk against or tell, and maybe, just talk again. Talk about the truth about what this government is. Talk about the truth about what the Vatican is. We're going to protect you against that. And why? Because they want you, the majority of the American people, to think that people like that are against God and country. So this Jade Helm thing is a perfect example of what I was explaining in the first half hour. And if you look back at Cain, he did the same thing. He figured, well, listen, if I can create the enemy and I can create aggressors, then I can come out and do wonderful things for the people. And that's what Jade Helm will be presented if people start wondering why all these military vehicles are in their community. And people will go home at night rest assured that they are protected. But it's really, if you really understood it, if people really understood what I'm talking about, they couldn't even get to this point. Because they wouldn't need, why would you need to be protected when everything is okay? But really what you're doing, what's happening here is all of these false flag events that we see, that I've noted on this show, are created so that, in the end, this new world order, this protection, this one world government that they propose, and what they're doing now is hitting you right in the face with their protection. Many people say, isn't that great to have all these military vehicles? They're protecting us. But in a sense, it's completely opposite. And there was a guy named Zen Gardner. He wrote an article on this, and I wanted to paraphrase it, and I'm going to do that on Jade Helm right now, so you understand what it is. And let me tell you something. This is going on all over the Southwest, for sure. This is a concerted effort running these military operations throughout the Southwest, in all the southwestern states. Now, Zen Gardner says, listen, I'm prefacing my thoughts with this provocative title. And his title is Jade Helm and the American Massacre. What is being perpetuated on the American people is virtually a complete dissembling of everything they supposedly hold dear, and will only lead to their ultimate destruction. Now, his point is good, because that's really what they are all about. A nationwide massacre of their infrastructure, personal rights, and protection, and even livelihoods and food insecurity is not only at stake, but now in progress. And do the government of the United States, with the Vatican's blessings, get away with this? By saying they're protecting you against freedom, against ISIS, terrorism, anybody who may step out in America. Because what they're going to do is basically, if you talk anti-American, you could be a possibility a member of ISIS, right? Now, look at some of the points here. Jade Helm is a military exercise, huge military exercise, endorsed by the American government and perpetuated on its own people in complete violation of not just the Posse Comitatus Act of 1878. I mean, when you look at this, but it is a total affront on every civil liberty the U.S. Constitution and the Bill of Rights is supposed to espouse and maintain. Now, let me tell you something. This isn't the first time these military exercises have taken place, and it's not going to be the last. But this is a huge one. But let me tell you how I've seen. Now, in a coastal city in Southern California, I had a fishing boat docked, and there's a big, huge pier. I mean, it goes on for 5 football fields, and it's up above, and it's the big, huge pier. Now, there's an old, an old bait boat. People have to, have bait to catch fish, so there's boats that go out and get all the bait. Well, there's one that's not been used. It's kind of run down, and the military uses it or the Navy SEALs use it for exercises. So, I noticed one day I looked out and I looked up on the pier, and I see all these people with guns and Navy SEALs and running and doing this, and I'm going, oh, here we go, Third World War right here. So as I went out of the docks, they were all sitting there having a smoke after they were running up and down with their backpacks and guns. And I looked at one of the kids, and it was kids. I mean, it looked like about 17 years old. And I said, hey, you got a license for that gun? And they kind of laughed. But anyway, I don't think they have a private license, do they? No. Join the military. Get an MK-47 or whatever you want. But anyway, so what's going on in this Jade Helm is it's in violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, but that's superseded because they're telling you now this is a threat here. We got to protect you. Occupying sovereign territory with the nation's own army indicates the very people for which a government was established to help provide for and protect are now their declared enemy. When you think about it, but that's not what they're going to tell you. They're going to tell you we're your friend. We're going to protect you from the enemy, which is the terrorists and those Americans who are sympathetic to terrorism. And their ideas of what sympathy of terrorism is completely contrary to what should be told to you. But this is exactly what Cain did. Now, the fabricated external threat of terrorism has been deftly translated, according to Mr. What's his name again? Let me see. Gardner. The fabricated external threat of terrorism has been deftly translated into meaning that anyone challenging the status quo, be it political, economic, or psychospiritual, is the enemy. Not external enemies, but domestic, as has always been the case, but openly declared since the first so-called Patriot Act. Remember all that? One of the interesting facts about the Patriot Act is it's a 360-page document, and we all have heard of it. Came after 9/11 to take away your freedoms, and it was written prior to 9/11. Rubber stamped by the Congress during that period of time when America thought that every building was going to be blown up. And guess who wrote it? It was written and drafted at Georgetown Jesuit University by a lawyer there, by one of the Jesuit lawyers. So you don't think they have connections? That's a perfect example that they do. Now, so we get this Patriot Act. That was the first one. Now, dissent has become illegal, and they're virtually declared any thinking American an enemy of the state with a litany of laws, rules, and regulations at their disposal, while mechanisms set in place long ago to protect personal rights have been taken away, eviscerated. The very massive size of this operation, that's Jade Helm, coming up, and if all you got to do, that just check, I mean, when I saw that YouTube of all of those, I mean, okay, a few tanks here and there, but this was like thousands of these military vehicles lined up for miles. The mere size of this operation and the vast amounts of military hardware pouring into distribution locations around the country, and that Barstow YouTube was a good example, indicates that this is not just an exercise, I don't think, but a stealth occupation, at the very least, designed to intimidate and acclimatize the American mindset to living in virtual martial law conditions. They want you to get used to and feel safe when they see these vehicles, while they step up their preparations for worse social conditions to come. So instead of protecting you, it's going to get worse, like it always has. Always. As wars rage, and maybe we're going through another cyclical period of bad times. Yes. Maybe the first time in America that it's going to be the worst of times. You remember Charles Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. Now, as wars rage on against supposed terrorists abroad. Now, when we look at what's going on abroad, it's amazing. Targeting a nation's own citizens in such draconian measures makes absolutely zero sense. Doesn't it? When hardly a non-government induced terror incident has transpired. Many more have died from medical and pharmaceutical abuse, police killings, and even strikes by lightning, along with a host of other causes, car accidents. Where's the big brave Justice League on these real problems? The inherent doctrines of personal freedom and individual sovereignty are being violated right before our very eyes. But we're accepting it because they tell you that they're protecting you. Now, the question haunts, said Mr. Gardner. Who's been noticing this? Besides those that fall for the supposed need for such a massive protection operation, how many are totally ignorant that this is even happening? Oh, there's many. And the potential outcome of such a maneuver. Now, it seems to me that the media here is a little lackadaisical, the mainstream media, covering it. And they do it for a reason. Because, if you're ignorant of it, the better chance you have to succeed in your plan, right? And the potential outcome of such a maneuver. What could be the outcome? Anything. Think about it. Could trigger this operation to go live. Has happened repeatedly with such staged government-sponsored operations. What happens if they stage something where a few of these tanks are going through one of these towns in Montana, and they stage an event where somebody tries to blow it up. Then the whole city goes under martial law, right? It's got to be a terrorist or a dissident American. When in fact they probably created this. One resisting individual, real or not, or more plausibly planted, could cause a chain reaction of events that would be devastating. Yeah, it would be. They got all the vehicles right there. And guess what? They'll do it in the name of protecting you. While at the same time, you can't go out at night after 10 o'clock. Or maybe the food sources have been contaminated. Or one other thing. Anything to get more control. Now, I've talked a lot about false flag events. And let's just concentrate a minute on that. While we check the time, we've got another 10 minutes. A false flag attack on these infiltrating government-deployed forces would easily justify a strong armed response, wouldn't it? Be the incident a lone personal reaction, staged sniper fire, a planted bomb on military vehicle, or something, or things much worse. Such triggers within a staged drill or exercise have proven to work time and time again. Now, what about a problem reaction solution? That's exactly what it is. Since they've created the problem of imposing military control, its intrusions on personal freedom, so-called practice or otherwise, the reaction would be no doubt begged. Once the reaction appears from whatever quarter, real or simply reported to have happened, the justification for full-on mobilization against the American people designed from the outset goes into play. Confiscation of weapons and all potential weapons is clearly on the agenda, as they've been practicing for years following natural and unnatural disasters. Precious metals, large amounts of cash, and even stockpile food could easily be on their list as well. This Jade Helm operation, again, is no simple exercise. At the very least, it's a conditioning of Americans for more control, even less personal freedom in the masticizing of surveillance state, and something worse in the near future. The bare fact remains that too many will fall for it and continue to stand back in fear and obedience to false, illegitimately imposed fascist controls backed by brute force. Now, the time has come to understand this, to understand exactly how this operates. And I think the last few shows I've done give you a clear picture that this isn't something new. This has been going on from the beginning of time. Now see what is happening for what it really is. Sound the alarm. Make yourself available. Talk about it. That doesn't mean you're a dissident. Our full awareness of the nature of these staged operations. That's why it's really important to understand all those little things that go on in 9/11 and Boston bombing and Columbine, and to really allow yourself to understand how this world works. That's why it's important to understand that NASA has been BSing you for years. Or at least the facts show that they could have been, and you have to make yourself aware of those facts. Because your full awareness and the nature of these staged operations and broadcasting it far and wide has pushed them back before. And we can do it again. We can slow down this train. You know what? We may not accomplish the eventual goal that you're thinking in your mind, well, can it be a beautiful... No. We could slow it down and wait for that day when your Creator takes over. Now, let your awareness, indignation, and refusal to accept this be known. And be prepared. Listen, they're up to no good. And it's all completely staged for specific reasons. Mr. Zander here, or Gardner, says very quickly, this great line, don't give them the response they want. Stay lit with the truth. Spread the word. Disengage from their systems and keep your peace. Not a bad message. Now, one thing that's always interested me is what people, they always are led down the path by these condemners. And they realize the path is always this. If you don't believe your government, if you don't believe your government, you don't believe your religion, people are catching on to the truth and they don't believe the media anymore on TV, well, they're going to go to what considers to be the alternative media, the answer, the truth. So they put people in place to keep you from even exploring the truth, I should put, and to move you in a direction of hatred, condemning, revolt, or running away into the wilderness and never talking to anybody. And I think by working in this field, coming from the mainstream media to the alternative media, I know who to watch out for. Now, I told you bluntly, as long these guys can go on and do what they want. I'm just saying, why not realize the deception or have them, they can't operate unless they have the deception. Now, you may think that just by bringing their names to the forefront that I somehow want to revolt against them. No, they got to be in place just the way they are. I like what they do because it gives me the opportunity to break through that deception so you understand how the major system of Cain and the media works. Now, one guy you're going to hear a lot about was Tex Mars. But you know something, Tex, you're busted. And not to be trusted. You know the Jesuits control the Rothschilds, who are only Vatican Knights under Jesuit power. Now, he's fairly known, and many people consider him a truther. I put that into quotes. Who has created countless books, videos, and audios on subjects such as Zionism, the Catholic Church, the Illuminati, and the world conspiracy. He's been promoted by Alex Jones, CIA. I call him, another controlled opposition person. Mark Dice and others in this mainstream controlled opposition truth patriot community. Yep. These are some of the people you got to really understand and look at closely. Disinfo Rothschild, and he's the author of Circle of Intrigue, Codex Magica, and not much disinformation about the Rothschild's choice and many, many other disinfo works. But he's a Jesuit trained from the University of Notre Dame Law School. Though he appears to be an honest investigator on the surface, one who looks deeper will find that he scares us with distractions such as Jew World Order, a classic Jesuit tactic, concentration camps, the impending Iran war, Planet X, and other nonsense. Right? He also tells us that it's the Zionist Jewish community, not the Vatican and the Jesuits, that control the world. All right, here's my point. Let him say that. I've always said to these guys, go ahead, spread what you think to be the truth the Americans should understand. But how come you never look at the other side of the coin and give it just as much credibility? Because they're covering it up. And when you look at the credibility on this side of the coin, you'll see it far exceeds what they talk about. Remember in 1999, a military intelligence death squad took out a large number of students in Columbine High School, a military intelligence-controlled brainwashing center in the heart of military spookland. There were at least 10 shooters, far more victims than we were told, and the massacre likely started a day earlier than we were ever told. Here's another false flag event. The father of one of these shooters was an Air Force intelligence agent. The father of the other was a clandestine FBI agent. Now, I'm just giving you a couple examples of how this really operates. And like I said, without them there, we'd never really ever understand this truth. You have to go one step farther. So I say leave them in place, but without them, They're not going to change. But by listening, by understanding what I'm talking about, you can get one step closer to the real truth. And whether you consider him Alex Jones, a CIA operative, controlled opposition, so what? There's many of them out there. You got to live with them, right? But get through to their deception, because their deception is clear once you understand what they don't tell you. And that's all I'm saying. And so, knowing we have to live with these condemners, let's really use it to our advantage, for once. Not by drawing swords and constantly fighting them, but by basically outing them for what they really are. We'll be back Monday on the Investigative Journal. Have a good evening.